Alright, so hello one and all, welcome back to another Mushoku Tensei episode review where I go over the anime, manga, and light novel to talk about everything and anything that the anime had skipped, because there is a lot. But we are finally into the second core, Season 1, Part 2, or if you just want to call it Season 2, that makes a lot of sense actually. And so, without wasting any time, let's get into Episode 12, The Woman with the Demon Eyes. So the episode starts off with Dead End making it to a beach on the wind port as Eris runs into the water playing in it. She starts to strip, saying that she doesn't need like a bathing suit to go into the water, but Rudeus tells them that the sea is filled with monsters and it's quite dangerous. And so I suppose that this means that much like a forest, which has condensed mana, which summons more monsters, the ocean is possibly very similar. We don't really know much about the ocean at all, really, even in the light novel or anything. I don't even think we meet a single sea race creature. We definitely meet a heaven race or divine or whatever they're called, the sky race. We meet them, but I think only one in the entire series. And even then, it's like they're not even a major character. But then there's the sea race, which we just know nothing about. We know that there's some kind of race. They like sweets, I believe, and there's pirates. That's it. It's kind of crazy. So I do hope that the sequel of Mushoku Tensei expands upon that, because it's so interesting. There's so much left to explore of the world. But anyway, at this news, both Rudeus and Eris are upset, however for very different reasons. We then cut to Roxy on a ship arriving to Windport with a bunch of pterodactyls flying alongside it. And there's this weird dog-cat animal thing listening to some jams by a weird-looking bird man. And as Roxy, Talon, and Alina Lies arrive at the Windport, Talon is so glad that he's able to stay on land finally. And Alina Lies, of course, mocks him for it. But Roxy is a little bit worried that these two are going to start goofing off while they're here and that they need to take things seriously. They're searching for, people here. But we cut to Rudeus where he's in, the same general area as Roxy, and he thinks that he heard her voice. And when he turns around, he doesn't find anyone, even though they're, completely isolated. In the manga, at least, when they do this scene, they're in, a crowd. They're in a crowd of people, and it's just they're passing by, and there's a bunch of there's dozens of people around them. But in this, Roxy's kind of just off to the side, isolated, Rudeus is blind. No wonder he needs a new eye. But one of the people working at the docks talks to Dead End, saying that they've heard of them. There's Mad Dog Eris, Guard Dog Rudeus, and Kennel Master Rudeus. And Rudeus is a little bit annoyed that they don't even know his name. But he doesn't mind the nickname because he would love to put a leash on Eris. But as Rudeus thinks that, the man says that there's a fare of 5 iron coins per human, but for supers it's 2,000 green ore coins. And so, let's go back to the currency chart. So 2,000 green ore coins is the equivalent of 20 Asura gold coins, which is a lot of money. And so at a restaurant where they can only afford to spend low-grade food, they discuss their money situation. And Eris is worried that they're going to have to leave Rudeus behind, but Rudeus says that is not going to happen. She then asks Rudeus if he can run across the water, to which he says that he unfortunately cannot. And she's like, God damn, that's a problem then, isn't it? Eris is awesome. She's so stupid. Have you seen the meme? I may be stupid. That's it. Eris exudes that perfect energy. I love it. But Rudeus then takes a look at Aquahardia before Rudeus apologizes for the situation. And that night, Rudeus worries over money as he gets a dream from Hitogami, whom he hasn't even seen for a whole year now. He tells Rudeus that he really screwed the pooch this time and that he didn't expect Rudeus to work with pea hunters. Everything would have went perfectly fine if he just turned them in to the police. But it was quite entertaining to see the whole situation play out. But now, not as an apology for what happened, Hitogami gave some advice. Buy food and walk down an alleyway. The next day, Rudeus leaves Rudeus and Eris to train by themselves, and upon seeing Roxy, Rudeus gets distracted for a moment as Eris manages to land a hit on him. And so then she celebrates her strength as we cut to Rudeus doing what Hitogami told him to do. From there, Rudeus finds a starving girl who he gives food to. She claims to be the great empress of the demon world, Kishirika Kishirisu. and thinking that she's just some normal kid playing like make-believe, he goes along with it. And she's quite happy about it, actually. But looking at Rudeus with one of her demon eyes, she says that he looks super strange, and it's just disgusting. Perhaps it's because of like Rudeus like being from another world. Maybe souls look different. I mean, I don't even think there are souls in Mushoku Tensei. Maybe his mana is different. It's interesting why she doesn't like the look of it. Maybe it's just the extreme mana that he has. I don't know. But regardless, she says that for saving her, she'll grant him one wish. Rudeus then asks for wealth, but she's like, can't you see I'm poor as shit, dude? Like, come on, ask something else. He's like, okay, so can I rule half the world then? She's like, okay, but slow your roll. Not even I can do that. And then he's like, okay, then how about your body, I guess? And she starts to strip, but then she's like, wait, shit, sorry, I've got a fiance. I can't do that to him. And then Rudeus is just like, what can you do then? And then she's like, well, isn't it obvious? When Kishirika offers someone a wish, it's to acquire a demon eye. She then proceeds to stab Rudeus's eye and replace it with a demon eye, giving him slight foresight. Kishirika jumps away and we can hear her crash into something. As Rudeus kind of stumbles away like holding his eye, he bumps into a guy with a scar who gets mad at him. But then pushing the guy away, a pot lands right before where he was just a moment ago. But later, when reunited with Eris and Rudeus says that she's probably the real deal, but he didn't know that the Demon Empress has been resurrected yet. Apparently, she has 12 demon eyes in her body and can see through anything. And it seems like, much like Batagati, she's kind of just on an aimless journey for her own purposes. Eris, excited, says she wants to look for Kishirika, even if she has no hope in finding her. And now we cut to about a week later, and Rudeus has already kind of gotten used to his demon eye and says that it's very similar to silent spellcasting. He controls his mana to adjust his vision. The more mana he puts into it, the further he can see into the future. If he puts enough mana into it, he can see up to about 2 seconds into the future currently. However, the further in the future he can see, the more duplicates he can see. These are like the different possibilities of the future. But he and Eris spar before he basically just like one-taps her and pins her to the ground, and it's just an easy victory for him. But then she shakes Rudeus' hand before trying to pull a fast one on him, but then he easily counters it. And so with tears in her eyes and feeling defeated, Eris goes back to their wherever it is they're staying. But ignoring whatever happened at the end there with Eris, Rudeus compliments Rudeus in his progress with the eye. He knew a Superd with a demon eye, but died before he could even master it. And Superds, they live a long time. And so mastering it within a week is really impressive. Rudeus then spars with Rudeus to test his own strength, but he ends up being completely beaten. And a little bit later, Eris and Rudeus have a discussion about how she feels bad that she's always weaker than Rudeus. Rudeus apologizes because the demon eye is kind of like cheating to her. She doesn't feel like that it's legit power, and I mean, to be fair, it kind of is, but it isn't. Because while Rudeus gets this, demon eye that can allow him to see the future, Eris is actually, working hard in training to get stronger. Once they're sleeping in the middle of the night, Rudeus gets up, takes Aquahardia, and leaves. Outside, Rudeus then catches Rudeus, wondering where he's going, and he just says, I'm going to a brothel with my staff, just doing some kinky wizard play, if you get what I mean. But Rudeus obviously sees right through this and convinces Rudeus to not sell the staff, because obviously that's what he's going to do, because they need money, and that is a very expensive and valuable staff. But there's still the trouble of crossing the borders in the ocean. But there is smuggling, that is an option, but Rudeus doesn't really want to bring it up because Rudeus would likely see the smugglers as villains, and so there's no point in even trying to talk to him about it. But Rudeus then says that he will turn an eye to any evil that he sees until they cross the ocean. And then, on cue, the man with a scar shows up and announces himself as Gallus Cleaner. And that is episode 12 and the first episode of the second half of season 1. Goodness. But let's go over the outro because we get some new shots in here. So the ending song shows us the destruction of the Fidoa region from the teleportation incidents. We see Roxy, Talon, and Alina Lies before cutting to a silhouette of an elf who is the white-haired angel that Ariel met when Derek died. If you don't know what that's about, go check out, I believe it's the last episode. Yeah, so it's in the episode 11 review, at the end, kind of near it, during the light novel, we talk about the Princess of Asura in the Angel. It's a side story about Ariel. We meet her, the Princess of Asura, or one of many, I think. And then there's Derek, there's Luke, and Fitz. So we kind of get to meet all these characters. Season 2 will introduce them formally, but I thought I'd go over it anyway because it's in volume 3. that we meet these people, but we don't get to see them until like volume 7 of the light novel. But continuing on with the outro, we see a drunken Paul with some woman before seeing Ghislaine in the ruins of presumably the Boreas estate, but she could be in the conflict zone because that's where she's been transported to. And if you don't know about that, check out my episode 8 review where I go over in the light novel the tale of the forest goddess. And yes, spoilers, I guess. It's about Ghislaine and where she was transported to during the displacement incident, which again is something that we don't get in the anime, and it sucks because there's so much cool stuff. But then in some city we see Lilia and Aisha, and then we get random shots of events that Dead End will go through in the future, as well as just some shots of them hanging out and having a good old time. But now with that out of the way, let's get into the manga. So the manga starts off pretty similarly with both Dead End and Roxy, Alina, Eyes, and Talon making it to the Westport. But then soon Eris immediately gets hit on and has her hand kissed, whereas in the light novel it was Kurt who did it back in the Petrified Forest. But in this it's just some random bozo doing it here. And the scene plays out pretty similarly with Eris freaking out and then Rudeus licks her hand, only this time Rudeus kind of just goes, huh, I guess he's amused. But we then cut to Roxy and Co as Alina Eyes exits the ship saying that she's going to do some manhunting. But Roxy says hey, no, we are here to find Rudeus and his family. But then Alina Eyes kind of teases Roxy and goes, oh, you're only interested in finding your precious disciple, aren't you? But then Roxy gets embarrassed, but as all of this is happening, Rudeus is talking with Eris and they cross paths with each other without even realizing it. And much like in the anime, he thinks that he hears his master's voice, but turns around. But in this time, again, they're in this giant crowd, so it makes a lot more sense. But Rudeus then talks to the clerk at customs and is told that a superbird will cost 400 times that of a human to travel, and he freaks out a bit. And then Eris goes oh, come on, Rudeus, a gray rat should be more refined. But then he tells her the price, and she starts to freak out as well. And so Rudeus thinks up of 3 plans. 1, earn money legitimately, which could take them about a year to do. 2, go into a labyrinth to get some rare things to sell, but Rudeus even said that even for himself that could be a risk. Or 3, work with some smugglers to get them across to Millis, but Rudeus wouldn't be too happy about that. And then that night, Rudeus actually has a dream not about Hitogami, but about Roxy. She pulls off her face and it's revealed to be Hitogami. Again, he has some interesting powers. We don't see any illusions or anything in the anime, but in the manga, I don't think in the light novels too much either he has much control, but at least in the manga, he is the man god, right? He can do whatever he wants in that void. Kind of crazy. But Hitogami then tells Rudeus to buy food, go into an alleyway, and that's what Rudeus does the very next day. But then at the same time, Roxy follows Rudeus and Eris, and Rudeus thinks that while he's off doing this thing, he's thinking that Eris and Rudeus are doing something together. He's such a jealous man. But Rudeus then comes across a small girl, Kishirika, being dragged by a man who's going to fill her stomach up. And so Rudeus uses stone cannon to knock the guy out, and Kishirika actually gets angry at him because she thinks that he was actually going to feed her food. I don't think he was. But then Rudeus feeds her like he does, and then she's excited about it, but then she pauses. And she says that Rudeus looks weird and asks if he has a twin that died in the womb. Rudeus denies that, and then she goes, really? But say, did you know that your magic is stronger than Laplace's? Which, just for clarification, it's not, but we'll get into more detail about that in the light novel. But Rudeus ignores that comment because this is just some kid saying it. Kishirika then goes on and gives Rudeus the magic eye and describes it that it can see a few moments into the future and is called the Eye of Foresight. Apparently, it's something that can help him in particular, and that's why she gave it to him. Kishirika then leaves and says that she's out to find her fiancé. And from there, Rudeus bumps into Gallus, who asks if he had seen a drunken man anywhere, and Rudy points to the alleyway where he knocked out the man who was trying to feed Kishirika. But then we cut to Rudeus and Eris, who are being watched by Roxy, and obviously knowing where she is, Rudeus calls out to her, asking what she's doing, but then she gets scared and runs away. And just then they find Rudeus stumbling in the streets as it's almost like he's dying, and these are his final words. And he goes "We're the two of you in the middle of a date." And Rudeus goes, "That's blood coming from your eye. Oh my god, what happened, dude? Tell me." Yeah, because Rudeus would say dude, but he's "Please tell me. You weren't on a date." and then he dies. That's like the only thing he cares about. But as this was happening, someone was watching them. But we then cut to a week later and Rudeus has mastered his eye, which Rudeus says that is like extremely abnormal. But Rudeus asks what Rudeus up to while he went off and trained his eye, because he kind of just kept himself to his room while they, like, every day they'd go off and do something. And when they come back, Eris would be dripping with sweat. But Eris goes, Ara, do you really want to know? And so it's revealed that they were training together, and then Eris and Rudeus have a spar, he beats her, and then he gets stomped by Rudeus. However, the difference is that Rudeus was always able to see just one future version of Eris, meanwhile he saw multiple, even at that 1 second mark. Rudeus was so skilled that even at the 1 second mark, he was able to have multiple possible futures. Meanwhile, like, it was stated before that when Rudeus goes to like 2 seconds, that's when he saw the multiple like possibilities. But with Rudeus, that's at the 1 second mark. And anytime he would move according to one of those visions, the future visions would then change to update for what Rudeus did. And so that's why Rudeus, even though, yeah, he can see the future, all he's doing is seeing his defeat a second before it happens. And so Rudeus then explains that with every move, he thinks about multiple ways about striking, dodging, or blocking his opponent. If they stick their arms out, he'll grab them, and if they don't, then he punches, stuff like that. And so this is a like stark contrast to Eris, who, although is far more skilled in combat and has more physical prowess than Rudeus, she's got like a one-track mind and doesn't really like think about that kind of stuff. But then Rudeus goes to sell Aquahardia and Rudeus stops him as Gallus Cleaner shows up. And it seems like that Rudeus was the one who contacted him. So that's interesting. A little bit of different, we get a little bit more explanation, kind of alternate versions of events, some misinformation. Rudeus does not have a stronger power than Laplace. I don't think so anyway. Maybe he does. But we do get more clarification of that later. So let's get into the light novel, because there's quite a bit. We get a lot more information in the light novel, and I'm excited. And so, because we start a new volume, because this is volume 4 now, we kind of get a reintroduction to the characters, and Rudeus says that he just turned 11 a few days ago, meaning that it's been over a year since the teleportation incident. And it's now officially K418. And it's also stated that Rudeus' third eye gem thing can sense and detect any living creature for over 100 meters away. Damn. And for comparison, that's about a football field's length away, just a whole circle around him. That's crazy. And it's stated that Eris has grown a little bit toned, but it's not like she's the Hulk or anything now, not like Ghislaine, but it's like a perfect balance between softness and muscle. However, Rudeus does worry that one day the muscle will become a little bit too much. But we then get that beach conversation scene as we do in the anime before they make their way to an inn after they stopped off at the Adventurers Guild. And Rudeus noticed that the further south that they went, the more humans there were in these guilds, and surely that when they hit Millis, that number would skyrocket. But Rudeus then checks out the job board to browse because it said that you can earn a lot more money far easier in Millis due to the different currency. And now, we get more currency updates. So now not only do we have information about the Asuran currency, the Demon Continent currency, but we also have the Millis Continent's currency. What's interesting is Rudeus previously converted the Asuran currency and Demon Continent currency into yen, because that's the currency that he's most familiar with. But now, when he converts the Millis Continent currency, he uses stone coins instead, which admittedly is still a 1-to-1 yen ratio, but even still, it's interesting that he'd prefer using currency of this world to compare with versus one of his previous world. It really just shows that he's like fitting more into this world. He is becoming Rudeus Greyrat more and more every day. But because he converts it to stone coins, that's what I'm going to do. And so because stone coins and yen are a 1-to-1 conversion, in order to convert yen easily into your currency, if you're like American, Canadian, Australian, or use euro, essentially take off 2 zeros, kind of, and you get a general like estimation of how much money that is to your currency. If you're anything else, you're out of luck. But the Millis Continent currency goes like this. We have a small copper coin, which is worth 10 stone coins. A large copper coin, which is worth 100 stone coins. The silver coin, which is worth 1,000 stone coins. Gold coin, which is worth 5,000 stone coins. General Dollar, which is worth 10,000 stone coins, and the King's Dollar, which is 50,000 stone coins. And that, comparing the Demon Continent currency to the Asuran currency, there is a big gap. The green ore coin, which is their most valuable currency, is still only an Asuran large copper coin. But then we have the Millis continent, which still isn't too far off. It's still not as valuable as the Asuran coins. The King's Dollar, the most valuable coin in Millis, is still only half of what an Asuran gold coin is. So it's kind of crazy. And plus, they have a lot of different kinds of currency. Kind of crazy. But anyway, moving on from that. I feel like I went into too much detail about that. But Rudeus says that B rank missions on the Demon Continent earn you generally about 5 to 10 scrap iron coins. And let's say in Millis, a B ranked mission would reward you with 5 large copper coins. That would yield almost 10 times as much money. And so that means that it's much more efficient to earn money in the Millis continent rather than the Demon continent. But Rudeus does say, however, if they need to stay here for a while, he'd probably only accept B rank jobs because they're safe and quick compared to A rank and S rank missions. And some of those could take over a week to complete each, so it's not really worth it. And that's why he hasn't promoted their party to S rank either. They like the B rank missions, which they couldn't accept if they ranked up. And on top of that, as an A rank party, you can still accept S rank missions, so there is no real need for them to rank up at all. However, if you were to rank your party up to S rank, you would then be given special perks, possibly like discounts at lodgings, given better guild jobs, or possibly the guild would turn a blind eye to some sketchy behavior. But none of that kind of applied to Dead End. They didn't really need that. But as Rudeus dealt with that, he heard Eris yelling at some guy who touched her and proceeded to beat him senseless. Rudeus eventually had to step in and pull Eris off of the man, and that was apparently a pretty regular occurrence for them. But as the scene happened, some people started to go like, oh shit, is that Dead End? They're starting to recognize the party. And someone goes like, I heard Superds are brutal, but this guy, he's not a bad one. He's one of the good ones. He's a nice guy. And this is apparently the first time that they've heard something like this, which means they are making good progress. And so after they praise Mad Dog Eris and Guard Dog Rudeus, they then make fun of Kennel Master Rudeus and says that he's the nastiest of the bunch. They also whisper that because he's the size of a dwarf, he's probably pretty small like everywhere, if you know what I mean. But Rudeus in response says like, okay, I'm not packing like a lot of heat, but like, I'm growing just fine. It's gonna get bigger one day. And so, I guess what Rudeus is above average, I can estimate. That's stuff that we need to know. I love the detail in Mushoku Tensei. It's so great. But I'm not the only one who's flustered like this, because Rudeus then looks over at Eris, who's blushing about the whole situation. So, me and you, Eris, we're in the same boat for different reasons, but we're in the same boat. And so after that situation, they leave the guild and they find out the price of the fares. And so it would cost 5 scrap iron coins for 2 humans and 200 green ore coins for a Superd. But later on, when they were eating some kind of fish, Rudeus notices that Eris has lost all of her etiquette when it came to eating and was just shoving food into her mouth. He tells her to eat properly, but she just doesn't listen and continues to scarf down the food. Rudeus just shakes his head and says, alright, I know that we're eating, but I'd like to conduct a meeting. But then in response, Eris starts to act all prim and proper and goes, Rudeus, talking during a meal is poor manners. Rudeus then just bites his tongue and continues eating. But then they go over the same kind of conversation like they did in the manga, talking about the different ways to get across the border. But that night, Rudeus talks to Hitogami as he tells him to buy food and go into an alley. He also says that Rudeus previously made the wrong choice when dealing with pea hunters, but in the end, they're already nearly at Millis, so it's all good. According to Hitogami, results mean everything. And Rudeus then asks if he doesn't think too hard about the advice that he's being given and just does it blindly, things should work out in the end. But then Hitogami's like, well, I mean, it'd be more entertaining if you did put a lot of thought into it. And then to rebel, Rudeus is like, aha, all right, I will just listen to your plans, all of your advice, I'll listen to it word for word and not do anything else. He'll do it perfectly so it is not entertaining for Hitogami. But then Hitogami's like, oh, well, I'm looking forward to that as well. And then the next day, Rudeus does exactly as he's told, and then he realizes that he's being manipulated by Hitogami. He's falling into exactly what Hitogami wants, and so now from now on, he's not going to listen to Hitogami ever again. Because God, Hitogami's really good at We thought that Rudeus was a good emotional manipulator. Hitogami's on a whole other level. He plays people like a fiddle. But then Kishirika and Rudeus' conversation goes pretty similarly as it does in the manga, only she doesn't say that Rudeus is stronger than Laplace. That is not true. What she does say is that Rudeus' mana pool rivals Laplace's mana pool and possibly even exceeds it. There's a big difference there. Rudeus is not more powerful than Laplace, a demon god. He's just got a lot of magic, like Laplace did. And so I feel like that's just a big thing that, like, we need to clarify here. Rudeus is not that strong. He's not, like, number one on the list of 7 powers. But then Kishirika offers Rudeus a demon eye, and she gives a list of a few that she has. She's been killed 2 times now and was resurrected only 400 years ago. Only. But that means that she doesn't have many stocked up at the moment, and so here's a few that she describes. The Eye of Identification. You can identify objects and their details, only if it's information that Kishirika knows, however. Eye of X-ray Vision. These can look right through objects, except for living creatures or high mana concentration. Eye of Distant Sight. You can see things far away, albeit not in the best focus, like a telescope. Eye of Foresight. You can see things moments before they happen. Eye of Absorption. This eye allows you to consume mana, but also includes the user's mana. Rudeus says that he wants 2 demon eyes, but Kishirika advises against it because it will just drive a human insane if they actually did that. Kishirika recommends the Eye of Foresight, and so he just goes with that one. Jamming her finger in his eye and wiggling around a little bit in there, she gives him the eye and leaves. She says that she's off to find Batagati, and so piecing things together from the adaptations, where in the manga she says she's going to find her fiancé, in the light novel she says that she's off to find Batagati. So, yeah, tell me how that one works, because I've got a million questions. But it's stated that Kishirika is the only one in the world that can pass demon eyes off to other people, and many people become followers just so they can get an eye. But with Rudeus' Eye of Foresight, he began training with it right away, and he notes that there are 2 types of focus, each taking about 3 days to master, and with a final day to combine the 2. The first kind of focus was the opacity of the future sight, and the second focus was how far in the future he wanted to see. He found that 1 second was just enough, while seeing up to 5 seconds was just far too much for him to handle. Adjusting the focuses took mana, but for someone with a mana pool the size of Laplace's or even larger, it wasn't any trouble at all. And so by the end of the week, Rudeus asks Rudeus and Eris what they keep doing every day that makes Eris sweat so much, and then Eris giggles and responds that it's a secret. And although he does joke about it here, he's not actually serious about Eris and Rudeus having an affair together or whatever. Not really an affair, they're not even together, just having a relationship together. And this is because Eris kind of always does this, even back in Fedoa. Anytime she'd train in secret back with Ghislaine, and if Rudeus were to ask about it, she'd say that it was a secret, and so this was just no different. But then on the beach, Rudeus and Eris have the spar, with Rudeus making a rule to use no magic except for the eye, and he's easily able to defeat Eris. And instead of her trying to get a cheap hit on Rudeus at the end, like in the manga and anime, she accepts the defeat and storms off. And so there's something I want to note here. Season 2 of the anime is going to soon surpass the manga, and it's pretty clear that the manga, the anime takes inspiration from the manga quite a bit, for that scene right there. And so I do wonder, I'm not too sure if the Depressed Magician arc has already, finished in the manga or not. I'm not too sure. But I know that Season 2, we're on volume 15 right now of the manga, and Season 1 covers volumes 1 to 10 of the manga. And so we are soon going to surpass that pretty, part 2 of Season 2, we're going to surpass the manga. And so I do wonder what's going to happen with that. Because again, the anime's taken a lot of inspiration from the manga, so I do wonder, I wonder if they're going to make it a lot more accurate, because as we've been going through this, obviously there's a lot of stuff that they skip, so I wonder how accurate the adaptation will be moving forward. But anyway, enough of that. Rudeus then has the spar with Rudeus, where neither of them used weapons and just threw hands. And so the result and explanation was exactly how it went in the manga. However, the wise old sage shows up and he tells Rudy that he can now do whatever he wants with Eris and can dodge her. There's no repercussions anymore. And so I'm starting to realize why people just don't like Rudeus too much. His inner sage is just evil. But anyway, Rudeus makes his way back to the inn and finds Eris hugging her knees on the bed. He had forgotten about her and notes that she's been, kind of depressed. Meanwhile, his inner sage packed things up and was nowhere to be seen. This is no time for horrible business. Rudeus said that apparently the reason why he made Eris and Rudeus fight each other was to deflate her ego. After hitting Rudeus once, her ego inflated to dangerous levels and needed to be contained. And so who better to deflate the ego than the one person that she has never lost against ever? And this is yet another case of different teaching styles, right? We have Paul, Ghislaine, Edna, Rudeus, and kind of Rudeus as a teacher, and they all have really different ways of going about it. Because for one, Rudeus thinks that deflating Eris' ego wasn't really the way to go about it. In fact, we saw that Rudeus kind of took the opposite approach from this when he was teaching Eris the demon god tongue. And there's the quote here that I talked about earlier, I believe in the previous episode. And it's just a really nice quote, and it's just, you push him forward, you don't hold him behind. But it is also understandable why Rudeus pulled Eris back, because she would get cocky, get into a fight where she obviously can't win, but she doesn't think that, and then she dies. But anyway, in the conversation between Eris and Rudeus, he compliments her on her strength, but she kind of just tells him not to, just don't say that. Don't give me pity. She says that she knew she'd lose anyway, and so at this point, Rudeus realizes that Rudeus isn't coming back to the inn, so this is a nice one-on-one between him and Eris. And so he sits next to Eris as she leans against him. Rudeus insists that Eris is super strong and that she can even hit Rudeus, but Eris says that Rudeus' eye is just cheating. She worked for her strength while he didn't. That's kind of why she's able to hit him, even though, he was distracted, even still. And it's at this where Rudeus, it hit him. If he relied on his eye too much, he would lose any strength that he had. Using the eye only in extreme situations when his back is against the wall, that was the best way to go about it. And so Rudeus apologizes, but she tells him not to. They then sat in silence for a while before heading to bed. But late in the night, Rudeus is up in bed, he can't go to sleep, and he questions why Hitogami's advice was why did he get him to get the demon eye? How is that going to help him get to Millis? And so then he decided to proceed with the hidden plan number 4, sell Aquahardia. He leaves with the staff, but not before placing a blanket over Eris so then she doesn't get a cold, and he exits the room. However, upon exiting, he comes across face to face with Rudeus. A conversation kind of almost word for word like it does in the anime happens, and Rudeus says that unlike Rudeus, who is willing to sell Aquahardia and even the meagered pendant, Rudeus would never sell his trident no matter what he was no matter what situation he was in. Not because it's a memento of his late son, but rather because it's the embodiment of a warrior spirit. Remember, to Rudeus, a warrior must never harm a child. A warrior is obligated to protect children. A warrior must never forsake a comrade, and a warrior must protect his comrades. Rudeus' spear, Aquahardia, and Roxy's meagered pendant, they all represent the comrades and children that they are fighting for. Selling it would be like giving up, stabbing them in the back. But as Rudeus and Rudeus make up and they decide to go through with the smuggling plan, Gallus Cleaner shows up, and it turns out he's a smuggler. This is what Hitogami wanted. Rudeus finds the drunk guy, gets the eye, stumbles across town and bumps into Gallus, and then because he found his buddy, Gallus is now returning the favor. A very subtle but effective plan. And that is episode 12, and whatever chapters of the manga and whatever pages of the light novel, that's Mushoku Tensei. And so yeah, a lot of new information, a lot of new magic lore. I like it. This is some of the stuff that I really like being added to Mushoku Tensei. Just we get to find out more about the demon eyes and that's kind of it that we got right now. But I still really like it. And so if you also enjoyed it, how about you give a like on this video and subscribe for more Mushoku Tensei content? I swear, one day I will post things other than episode reviews. It's just, this is the only thing I can do for right now. And so, bye.